Hello and welcome to the Your Financial Pharmacist Real Estate Investing Podcast, a show all about empowering pharmacists to achieve financial freedom through real estate investing. I'm Nate Hedrick, and each week, my co-host David Bright and I explore stories from pharmacists all over the country who are achieving their real estate goals while maintaining a meaningful career in pharmacy. Whether you're a first-time investor or a seasoned pro, we're here to provide education and inspiration about the world of real estate. Please note, this podcast is intended for educational purposes only and should not be considered financial or investment advice. Hey, David, how's it going?
Hey, good. Thanks. How you doing, man?
Good. We just wrapped up a great episode last week with Sean Richards, the resident tax guru over at YFP. And it got me thinking about all the things we need to be doing at the end of the year, right? How to maximize taxes, how to prepare for 2023. And I thought that'd be a great thing for us to talk about today.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of great content there that we dove into last week when it comes to bonus depreciation and documentation and all those things that kind of become those December considerations to maximize 2022 taxes. And taxes are one of those key considerations that make end of year business decisions really real.
And it doesn't mean that taxes is the only thing we think about, but business decisions, just like clinical decisions, are rooted in different areas. They have different perspectives. So just like being a pharmacist, when we're making a medication recommendation, we're not doing it just based on if there's a generic or if it's renally eliminated, right? One of those factors alone doesn't help us. It's all those pieces, lots of factors that we need to be thorough and evaluating everything.
Yeah, so some of those key real estate investing business decisions, as those come into play, we are thinking about taxes and tax planning, but certainly also thinking about the complexities that guide buy and sell decisions for properties, or how to maximize value and minimize expenses when it comes to those other costs associated with real estate investing, because those costs come into play as well.
Yeah, for sure. And since we're in the Thanksgiving and Black Friday and Cyber Monday and all the day shopping season right now, we thought it'd be a great opportunity to talk about and discuss more stocking up for upcoming purchases, especially with the deals and discounts that are flying right now.
Yeah, and as we preface often, this isn't specific tax investing advice. We wanted to bring up some general concepts. So please talk with your team to make sure that you're maximizing your own personal circumstances when it comes to properties that you may have sort of in progress right now, or if you're doing tenant turns or those kind of things. There's, again, a lot of complexity, but hopefully with some of this brainstorming and some of these general topics, we can get the juices flowing there. So there's three major categories that we wanted to talk through today. One was stocking up on materials. The second is making end of year property upgrades. And three is then those buy or sell decisions, whether those would fall to the end of 2022 or pushing into 2023.
Yeah, and jumping kind of right in, the materials is kind of top of my mind, right? Especially with the sales that are going on. Even though I don't have a current project I'm working on, I know there's some things I'm bound to use the next project. And so it's making me think about, man, should I buy some of that stuff right now while it's on sale? Like smoke detectors or like fire extinguishers. We go through those on every single property we do. It's really important to make sure those properties are safe. And so if I know I'm going to be buying those the next time I buy a property, maybe it's worth it to pick up a couple in bulk instead of buying them individually down the road. It's just something that we're always trying to look at and plan for.
Yeah, I think that it may not be as clear when a lot of people are looking at some of these sale ads that there are also these buy in bulk kind of options that exist where, buy 4 or buy 6 or buy 10, and then there's another 10% off or something. So if you are looking at those kind of things, in particular things like smoke detectors, oftentimes the code is not just to put one in a house. So sometimes you need more. I know another thing that we do this time of year is well, in big picture, when we're doing a renovation on a property, we oftentimes will replace a kitchen or a bathroom faucet proactively because it's so much cheaper to do that when you've already got someone in the house that's a professional that can take care of that task versus a night or weekend call when someone's got to then just run to the hardware store and pick up whatever's there, whether it's on sale or not. And so it can be much more expensive to replace those things on the fly. So we tend to buy faucets and fixtures on big sale days like this because we can store them pretty easily. Right? They don't take up a lot of space and we know that we're going to use them throughout the year. So particularly if you have a renovation coming up, that can be a time to think through how many faucets, how many light fixtures, those kind of things, and getting that now.
Yeah, what I like about both of those examples is that they're pretty universal and don't require a lot of storage space. I mean, I guess depending on how many you're buying, but they're not big, bulky items, right? And especially things that you don't want to be packing away. David, as you flip through these ads, like, are there other things that someone might be thinking about? What are a few items that are, maybe less useful to buy or more useful to buy?
Yeah, I think that you bring up a good point with storage because that's a real consideration, and that's
Mhm.
why, particularly in Michigan, I'm pretty hesitant about buying too much paint in advance because I don't really want to store paint in my garage, have it freeze, and become a problem there, right? So that will cause me to slow down a little bit. Paint has to be stored properly, and paint too can be a little more difficult to buy ahead of time if you don't know what sheens or colors or those kind of things. I heard a tip recently about taking a light switch cover off, like right at the entryway, and using a Sharpie marker and writing on the back of the light switch cover what paint
Mm-hmm.
color you use in that house, on the walls, the trim, the ceiling, what brand you're using, what sheen you're using, and then having it there because those records, I'm sure a pharmacist is thinking, well, I could put together a spreadsheet, and that's probably better, right? But it is nice to have those there so that if a contractor is going through and they need to know, oh, what is it to touch up that one wall, they can just pull out a screwdriver, take the cover off, read the information, put it back, and then go and get what they need. So, some of those things like paint, I feel like may not be the best thing to buy in advance and store in large quantities.
Yeah, that's a good one. And if you're like me, I'm not even buying all that paint myself, right? I mean, do you find that some of your painters are buying it or you're buying it for them? I mean, how does that usually work for the flips and the properties that you're rehabbing?
Yeah, we've had different painters that we've worked with throughout time that go in different directions with that. Some of them really like a specific product from a specific store. We had
Hmm.
painters that we worked with in one market that really loved Sherwin-Williams paint and they loved to go get it. And that was, they just wanted to manage that process. And we have other painters that they just love it if they can show up and all of the tape and all the paint and all the, everything has already been delivered and sitting there and they can just start, spraying or rolling or whatever they need to do. So different contractors may have different rules that way. And you may also want to have that conversation with your painter too, because some painters will mark up the paint if they provide it.
Hmm.
And so if you provide it, that may save some money as well.
And you got to think about leftover paint too. I know that every time I've done a house, we've got stuff just sitting around afterward that, and it's nice if you can get that to the kind of the right amount rather than having these huge 5 gallon buckets sitting around that are a bunch of extra paint.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one tip that I've heard too for rental properties is to just use the same color at every property so that you could
Mm.
buy 5 gallon buckets and just take the leftover to the next house and then, store only a few gallons that way, but it's always the leftover to go to the next place. And then if you need just a little bit for touch up, you can always find a gallon of that same brand, that same sheen, that same color, and you can do a little bit of touch up here and there too if you need.
One of the things I was thinking about too is some of the just bigger ticket items that I almost guarantee I'm going to have on every house, right? And so vinyl plank flooring came to mind. We replace a lot of flooring. Is that something that I've stocked up on that before, but it can because it's pricey, right? And you can usually find a good sale on it. But you did mention storage, and that stuff is heavy as all get out, and it takes up a lot of storage space. It's kind of a pain.
Yeah, yeah. We really messed up timing on an order one time and we had to take delivery on like 60 boxes of flooring, which was 3 pallets, and we had to put it in our garage. And then that ended up, A, I couldn't park my car in a garage for a while because we had that much flooring. And then B, that ended up with multiple trips because I don't have some big like 3,500 pickup truck, right? Like I can't move 3 pallets of flooring all at once. That ended up being a lot of hauling and a lot of moving to get that taken care of. So yeah, storage and transport and all those kind of things that can be a lot of work too if you're looking at larger, heavier items and trying to store that.
I'm probably crazy, but the last time I moved flooring into a house, first of all, it took like an hour because I had bajillion boxes. But I had to space them out. Well, I don't know if I had to, but I did. I spaced them out like around the house because I was afraid if I stacked them all up in like the dining room, I was going to come back and there was going to be a huge hole in the floor where the flooring all fell through. Like they're so heavy and they take up such a dense amount of space. I'm always worried about that.
Yeah, they are huge, and I'm sure that your flooring installer liked that because they didn't have to go pick them up from a pile and go move them all over the house. One thing is putting them all over is probably nice for the installer, but yeah, that is heavy work to move all that around, no doubt.
Yeah, and so I guess it's probably a good rule of thumb that only get things you're going to use, like duh, or something that's going to work in just about every property, and something that's pretty easy to store. Like we talked about the smoke detectors, the faucets you mentioned, the light fixtures, smaller things like that.
Yeah. And I think that makes sense for some of those smaller things that you can store and pack away and save a few $100 by buying in bulk and buying in advance. I think that can make sense. One of the potentially larger savings too can be on some more significant upgrades for a property.
Mm.
So I know as you've been looking through sale ads and things like that, what's on your mind right now?
Yeah, I just saw a guy posting in one of the Facebook groups that I'm in about the deal they just got at Home Depot, I think it was, on appliances. They bought stoves and furnace, not a furnace, excuse me, a stove, a dishwasher, all the like major kitchen
Mhm.
appliances at something like 60% or 50% off. It was a pretty impressive sale. And again, so I think about that too. I know I'm gonna have to buy appliances, but how good of a deal can I get now versus waiting and not having to store those things?
Yeah, those are definitely things that can be problematic to store. But I am seeing this season, and different years will have different ways that the sales work out. But I am seeing some buy in bulk kind of things too. That the more
Oh,
appliances you buy, the greater the discount can be at some different stores. So, it could definitely make sense to order appliances if you are thinking about upgrades in a property. If you have a property that has a really old refrigerator, really old stove, this may be a good time. I know that for the past several months it's been, and it's getting better now, but we had a stretch there where it was really hard to find appliances, and so we weren't doing as many updates. We were thinking, well, if that will last a little bit longer, let's have that last a little bit longer, because it's just hard to find things. But as appliances are coming back in stock and the supply chain is improving, and as now there are some better sales going on, this could be a time to think back and say, well, that house has a really old refrigerator. That might be the time to think about that replacement right now.
and a lot of times you can push out those deliveries if you need to too, right? So I've done this before where I buy from a major box retailer and push the delivery back by a couple weeks, and then push it back by another couple weeks, and they don't seem to mind at all. And it's not perfectly lining up with your project, but you want to buy three new refrigerators to replace two that you have and one that's coming up. You can delay those deliveries pretty easily if you're buying through one of the major box retailers.
Yeah, and that's a great conversation to have with the folks there, because
Hmm.
we had that where I didn't necessarily think about pushing those deliveries back. We ended up taking a delivery earlier in a project than I had anticipated, and so we had this new refrigerator sitting right in the middle of this new house where everyone's running around doing all the things that they're doing to renovate the house. And I go there one night just to check in on the place, and there's a big ding in the front of the freezer door,
Mm.
and so that kind of stuff happens when you stagger the deliveries not the best way. So that was a lesson for me to make sure that the timing of those deliveries really can matter. And so, if you are thinking about doing those replacements, oftentimes appliances coming in at the very last second, that can be a good timing for all that.
It's a great tip, and one that I often miss because I'm always like, oh, I gotta get the appliances in here so it looks good. Like I'm all
Yeah.
about the finished look and not the full plan. So that's a really good tip. David, as I dig through some of the sales ads, the other thing I'm seeing a lot of, just in some of the big box retailers, is the bathroom vanities, light fixtures, things that are priced really well. But if you're not planning renovation, it's a little bit difficult. I can't store those things like we talked about. I don't know exactly what's going to fit in a particular space necessarily, or how many I'm going to need. That's the only thing I'm seeing that I think I'm struggling with a little bit on some of those items.
Yeah, and we've done that before where we've tried to take a vanity or two and store it when we find something really good. Like, I'm just a sucker for a deal, and I walk like kind of by the exit of some of these stores some days, and there's the clearance section, and it's like, that's a crazy price. I'll bet I can fit that in the family minivan, and I try stuff like that, and I don't know that that's really been a huge win, because inevitably I'll buy a 36-inch vanity and the bathroom will only fit a 30-inch vanity or something like that.
Right,
So
exactly.
without having the tape measure and having all those plans set, I don't know if that's always a huge win. So yeah, lots to think about when you're getting those things that are very specifically sized for a property versus something that's really universal, like a faucet, a light fixture, a smoke detector, something like that.
Great tips. So let's move on then to our next question or key consideration here, talking about end of year property purchases and sales.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this last week in terms of the tax implications of, if you buy in 2022, what does that mean? If you buy in 2023, what does that mean? So if you're thinking about the tax side of things there, definitely jump back and listen to episode 83 with Sean. He breaks that down, and the value on one side or the other of that January 1 threshold. But if we step aside from the tax considerations for a minute. So Nate, with your realtor hat on, can you talk to us a little bit about kind of the timeline of a typical sale and the seasonality of real estate in that?
Yeah, so right about now, right about when this podcast goes live, is probably the break point for like listing a property, right? So if I had a property I was going to sell, even if it's best case scenario and I list it on Thursday or Friday, it gets offers by Sunday and we're under contract and rolling by Monday, it's still going to be probably a 35 to 40-day close unless that person is buying in cash. And so you're really just you're running out of time before the end of the year if you're looking to sell a property. Similarly, if you're looking to purchase, same exact timeline issues, right? Even if you find a place tomorrow, you're up against the wall basically trying to get your lender to finish it on time. Now, again, if you're purchasing in cash, title can probably get that done in 2 weeks, right? Maybe even less. So there's so little time for that, but for the most part, those property purchases, property sales, we're kind of looking at 2023 at this point moving forward.
Yeah, and I would imagine too that I've heard in years past, in more of a typical market condition, that there is definitely some seasonality too, as far as
Oh yeah.
seasonality of the market where things are really flying and seasonality of the market where things are just slowing down a little bit. And I would imagine that this stretch kind of between Thanksgiving and New Year's is one of the slower seasons for transaction volume and pace of transactions and things like that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you look at just globally across the months, I was just looking at this the other day for a market that I'm working in for a seller. And the dip we see in days on market that takes place over the summer, it's great. And it lasts from basically, at least in Cleveland, and again, it's specific to everywhere, but at least in Cleveland, we see this really nice drop in days on market that takes place from April to probably about October. And then it starts to kick back up again. And now we're looking at 40 plus days on market as we get into the latter months of the year and the beginning months of next year. So it can be specific to your area, right? If you don't have harsh winters when people don't want to get out, you're probably not seeing that level of differential. But even so, December timeframe is just not a great transaction volume time period because everybody's busy with everything else. It's how the kind of market goes in this time period.
Yeah. So the whole walking through the timeline of if you go live on the market on a Thursday, having offers on Sunday or Monday, that may make sense in the summer timeline, but
Mhm.
maybe a little less possible here, unless you're probably really aggressive with price or something else like that, right?
Yeah, that'd be one way to do it, right? Just be very aggressive on price so that you can be at the top of everybody's, to-do list. But just in general, I mean, with the way that rates have been changing, with the market being what it is in terms of not a ton of listings still available, but even when there are some, again, people are still trying to price them like it's the middle of 2022 instead of the end, and so we're just seeing that whole thing kind of slow down.
Yeah. So in this kind of odd season, would you, and I know it's all going to be local market dependent, but if you're listing a house, are you thinking about trying to get it on the market in December, or are you thinking about waiting until January? Is there any kind of strategy there with the holiday season right now?
It's a good question, and I've done houses before where we try to time that out. And what I'll typically do if we know that we want to try to get it in before January, right? If the seller's like, "Look, I'm ready to list. What's the best time to do that?" Typically, I like to do something between Thanksgiving and Christmas if I can. That's kind of a decent time period, but you've got to be right at the beginning of that window, and you've got to be prepping your seller. Or at least I usually will prep my seller that, look, if this doesn't get an offer by December 20th, we're basically going to have like 2 weeks off, right? Where it's just, there's not going to be much activity, and you have to be ready for that and just kind of prep people for that. So there's a argument to be made. Let's just wait until January. We can figure everything out on the back end. But if someone wants to list their property right away, there's a way to do it. You just have to be, intentional about how you're approaching that strategy.
Yeah. So that, compared to what we were seeing in terms of summer pace of crazy offers and super fast transactions, that's a lot slower. Is there then advantage for buyers? That is this a good time of year to be out there shopping as a buyer? If you're looking for a rental property, could this be a time when there's less competition or not as aggressive of a timeline? You have more time to chew on those ideas and decisions?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is a great time to use the exact same information that sellers are struggling with as a buyer to take advantage, right? So if you know that this is a slow time period, if you know someone's listing a property at the beginning of, yeah, right after Thanksgiving or the beginning of December, and it's getting closer and closer to Christmas, and they're not getting any offers, that's a great time to jump in. Kristen and I actually bought a property last year. We offered on Christmas Eve, the morning of Christmas Eve. We had been thinking about this property and going back and forth with the agent a little bit, and our offer got accepted and signed on December 24th. So it's a great time to come in as a buyer and try to find a deal.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think adding that into the tax strategy and the
Mhm.
complexities there, this feels like one of those situations where this could be a good conversation. If you're thinking about that end of year investment purchase or end of year investment sale, this feels like a good time to engage multiple members of the team to kick around those ideas and figure out what's the best option for you. Is that about right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we always advocate for that team approach, and you can start with someone like Sean, who we spoke with last week. Talk about taxes first. You can start with your accountant. You can start with your real estate agent. And again, our recommendation is that if you don't have anybody and you're looking for that kind of first step, start with a really good real estate agent and let them refer you to the other members of your team. And again, just a super quick reminder too: if you're looking for an agent, looking for someone that's investor friendly, we have the real estate concierge service. You can go to yfprealestate.com, tap into that service. It's a way to connect with myself. You'll get a 30-minute planning call. We'll talk about what your goals are, what your budget is, what you're trying to achieve, where you're trying to buy, and then we'll help you get connected with an investor-friendly agent wherever you are. So totally free service. Highly recommend that as a great way to get started with that team approach. But if you don't need an agent or you've got someone else on the team, start with them. Start with the person that you know. It's a great way to kind of take the first baby step.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we often say is that that initial hub team can then help with other referrals to, like we talked about painters and flooring installers and all those
Mhm.
other people that you need oftentimes to get a property from that condition at purchase to being a good investment property. So I like it. Lots of things to consider and strategize then as we come to the end of 2022. But juggling the sale and purchase thoughts, the Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales, all those kind of things. Hopefully this conversation can get that brainstorming moving for ending 2022 on a really strong note.
Yeah, and if you guys have questions or thoughts or strategies you're employing here at the end of the year, please jump on the YFP Real Estate Investing Facebook group. Tell us about it. We'd love to hear more. Or shoot David and I an email. We just had a couple of emails last week come in from some listeners, and we really appreciated that. We're going to plan a show around some of those ideas. So send us an email. You can connect with us at yfprealestate.com or again on the YFP Real Estate Investing Facebook group. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great rest of the week.
Thanks for listening to the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast. If you like what you heard on today's show, please leave us a review and subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. If you have a question, know someone that would make a good guest, or want to connect with Nate or David, head on over to yfprealestate.com and join the growing YFP Real Estate Investing Facebook group. As we conclude this week's episode of the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast, an important reminder that the content in this podcast is provided to you for your informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. Information in the podcast and corresponding materials should not be construed as a solicitation or offer to buy or sell any investment or related financial products. We urge listeners to consult with a financial advisor with respect to any investment. Furthermore, the information contained in our archived newsletters, blog posts, and podcasts is not updated and may not be accurate at the time you listen to it on this podcast. Opinions and analyses expressed herein are solely those of your financial pharmacist, unless otherwise noted, and constitute judgments as of the dates published. Such information may contain forward-looking statements which are not intended to be guarantees of future events. Actual results could differ materially from those anticipated in the forward-looking statements. For more information, please visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thank you for your support of the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast. Have a great rest of your week.